and welcome to the Huddle Breakdown, and the emphasis is on the word breakdown this week, I think. James, I'll come to you first. We have to find a way to objectively assess what we watched at the weekend. Is that something you feel able to do? Because I certainly don't.
I'll give it a go. I'll be a professional and show up and do my job. That's the most I can promise.
Yeah, you must be a glutton for punishment, Alan. If you've stuck to your normal routine and watched that through twice as you normally do, I take it you've already put yourself through that torture.
Yeah, the snack packs out there, people. I feel like I've done my bit actually. In passes for production meeting, I did suggest we cover the World Cup playoffs maybe, or talk about the exciting race at the top of the English Premier League. So if folk prefer that, smash that like button, and we'll avoid any more comment about what happened on Sunday and never mention it again.
I think literally, I might rather be a Tottenham Hotspur supporter at the moment, or maybe that's too far. I don't know.
I think that's a bridge too far.
But we'll get to it. James, I'll come to you first. The customary question is, what was your overall assessment of the game? I don't know if I've had some sort of trauma response and kind of blanked it out of my mind, but I can't remember a lot of the specifics. So I'm going to ask you, what were the specifics you remember, and what was your overall impression?
Yeah, it was like as we would say in North American sports, it was like an all-star game of shite, right? So you get all the for those that aren't aware, the All-Star game is when, it's like the best players you bring together in a game, an exhibition. And this was like the worst of things that you could put together. The worst pitch, an incoherent lineup, tactics that were who knows, substitutions that were who knows, individual performances, blah. It was just there's so much that was just kind of awful confluence together, and we rail on about randomness and stuff, and the importance of kind of pushing underlying performance data to be able to absorb randomness, and how just over normal 38 games you're going to drop some points when you actually played pretty well and the other team just kind of had some scored off a corner, an own goal, a penalty, that kind of stuff. This was legit. We were so terrible. If we would have somehow clawed back even a draw in this game, it would have been highway robbery. And we've had multiple versions of that so far this season, where we've had, pretty poor performances where we got points out of it, including recently. And so the clock struck midnight, and we weren't able to do it this time, and justifiably so. Like, it was just really, really awful.
Yeah, Alan, as James says, some of the games that you might go back to earlier this season, the away game at Kilmarnock, the away game at St Mirren, games that, as James says, we sort of committed a bit of highway or daylight robbery in getting victories out of those. I don't know what it looked like to you, but I think we could have played that game for 3 or 4 hours and would never have got that outcome.
Yeah. So try and maintain a degree of professionalism. So, okay. I think the first half was okay. It was actually okay, right? It was actually okay. I like the fact that, it was horrible to watch. The pitch was an absolute disgrace. We're not allowed to make excuses, obviously. This is Scotland. This is what happens. This is worse than playing at Livingston. Worse than playing on any plastic pitch, actually. One team was set up to play the perfect game tactically, accepting the conditions, and one wasn't, and that's credit to Dundee United, and that's on the Celtic coaching staff. But having said all that, I thought in the first half it was decent. Actually, the approach was sensible in that we didn't play hardly any football in our own half at all. As I say, that if you go back for as many years now as I've been doing this in terms of capturing the data, the varying degrees, under Neil Lennon not so much, but under Postecoglou, Rodgers to a ridiculous degree, the centre-halves dominate the ball regularly, would be averaging over 100 passes each against the bottom six team. Cal McGregor easily up there with 80, 70, 80, 90 passes, but a lot of playing out from the back, teams sort of sitting in, and Dundee United to do a lot of sitting in. But Celtic managed to not fall into that trap of letting Scales and Arthur have the ball. They completed relatively few passes in the first half, and it was actually McGregor, Negrin, and Hatate that were dominating the ball. So in theory, we had the ball in the right areas of the pitch with the right players. And actually, Hatate in particular had a really good half in terms of he was getting the ball forward effectively, and Negrin had a really good half in the respect of finding space between the lines, receiving the ball just outside the box. It was at that point that it all broke down. And Negrin lost virtually every duel. If both him and Iheanacho between them, and they were the two central attacking players, lost all but one duel between them of about 17 duels or something like that. So they just couldn't make any headway. Dundee United have three centre-backs, two sitting midfielders, very congested in the middle. Celtic seem to insist on playing through the middle. It is a very small pitch at Tannadice. It was okay to a point. We more or less kept the ball away from our own goal. We didn't get dragged into it being a long ball kind of set piece fest for them. There were moments, but in the main, we kind of restricted that quite well. And we actually got the right players on the ball in the right areas. But as I say, it broke down. It broke down that final third. Maeda and Yang are going to give you very little as creative players. We know that. The burden falls to Tierney and Donovan. Tierney and Donovan barely hit 50% with their passing. So so the bits that needed to work, which was Negrin and Iheanacho doing something with it once they got the ball near goal, and the fullbacks on whom the burden of creativity falls under this system, I'll call it, couldn't complete a pass hardly, couldn't complete a cross. So it all fell down in that final third. In terms of the way that we played the game, the structure, the way we'd forced the game into their half, I thought it was okay. It was okay. It was always going to be a coin flip game because of the extreme nature of the pitch. Hadn't been watered, no grass on it, bobbly, etc. The way Dundee United play, long ball, chaos, all that. It was always going to be a chaotic game. But what was the most disappointing then was having navigated to half time and been all right and in the game, and it was all looking not great, but it didn't sense any particular danger, is it just kind of fell apart so much in the second half. And again, individual errors get punished, of course. We see that each goal was a combination of things, as we've talked about many times. The most disappointing thing of all of it was the lack of response to going a goal down. After Celtic conceded the first goal, there were something like 16 shots in the game, and Celtic only had 7 of them. And if you think about a title-challenging team with superior resources, to not be peppering the opposition, to be outshot by the opposition when you're 1-0 down, especially against, again, no disrespect, but they're not a great side. I mean, they're probably 6th or 7th is probably about right for Dundee United, but aside from the left-back Ferry that James had mentioned, who just had everything went his way in that game. He was terrific. There's no one else on that side. You think, oh yeah, he looks a half decent player. They're not a great side, but fair play to them. They won the game comfortably, really. They played, but if I take a step back, the lack of response, the lack of, in football vernacular, you'd call it fight, reaction. Add all these labels to it. Whatever it was, there wasn't the reaction you'd expect from a superiorly resourced team. But the second thing that I found dispiriting, really, was that from Motherwell the week before at home, and then Dundee United, we've basically played the two teams at opposite ends of the playing style spectrum in the league. Dundee United, the most long ball orientated, set-piece dominant side in the league, big physical side. Motherwell, probably the smallest side in the league, high dependence on possession, movement, passing the ball out. So we played the most either extreme of that spectrum, if you like. And in both cases, I know we beat Motherwell, but in both cases, we've let the opposition team play the game they want to play. We've had no impact on imposing Celtic's style of play, whatever that might be, and that might be the problem, on the opposition. We've just reacted to whatever they've done and almost just taken the view again that, oh, well, we've got better players, therefore something will happen and we'll score a goal because we're better intrinsically. I can't think of anything else. Can't think of another, approach or label to apply, description to apply to the way that Celtic is set up in that regard. But we'll come on to the implications of this. It's a crazy season. I think it will continue to be a crazy season. So not all is lost, I would say, but it was dispiriting. It was very dispiriting.
Indeed. James, I guess to pick up on one thing that Alan said there about allowing opposition to play their game. One thing I've noticed, particularly since Brendan Rodgers has left, we all lamented the horseshoe of death as it became known. But at least in that case, we had control of the ball, we had control of the game, we had control of how it would play itself out. Is that a major issue for us, do you think? The fact that, we don't appear to be, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that we don't seem to be holding possession quite as much, and therefore we're not able to control the game, and that seems to be causing as many issues for us as anything else. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, again, people are going to understandably get sick of hearing me say it, but I've been calling it the pick your poison. And our kind of non-penalty XG difference in Rodgers' tenure versus the games under O'Neill is not that dissimilar. It's just you've had it ratchet up. So under Rodgers, we were around a little over 1.5 in XG4, and I think it was, like 0.62 against. And 0.62 historically is kind of normal for us overall, with about 2/3 of that from open play and 1/3 from set pieces. Like that's kind of our normal range historically, but chance creation way down under Rodgers, horseshoe death, no forwards, no strikers, all that stuff. And then what we've seen under O'Neill is up to about 0.86 in XG conceded. So that's a big swing up. Like that's a large amount up, and we have created more. We're, let's call it 1.7374. So we've been able to create more, but what's happened is the volatility's gone up game to game, right? And that it speaks to, so if you're conceding a lot more and like game to game, the outcomes are less controlled, as Alan's been talking about for months now. Surrendering this control, being more reactive, not being able to impose our style of play on other teams. It just means that you're going to lose at home to Hibs and lose at Dundee United after getting a good result against Motherwell. Like it's just kind of this roller coaster ride. And I agree with Alan. Like I'm not apoplectic that all hope is lost, because that degree of kind of randomness can break your way on a game-to-game basis. It's just I'm no more confident, home to Falkirk than I am away to Dundee at this point. Like it's just there's so many ways that we can be had at, and so many vulnerabilities that we have that other. I mean that. A Jim Goodwin side. And I know Alan's going to get into some of the history with Goodwin here in a little bit, but a Jim Goodwin side who effectively, when I say effectively, meaning he disrupted us enough with his high press that it was a pain. They didn't really create any much in the way of chances off of it. But normally a Jim Goodwin team does not try that generally. And if they do, they get ripped apart by Celtic. Hence why he generally doesn't try it. And we didn't make them pay. Now, again, the pitch probably had something to do with that. But as I've been saying for the last couple of months, if you have a pulse and you do any opposition analysis of Celtic, you can get away with it because we're not making teams pay for it. And a lot of the time we're just going to shell it forward and we're going to go long. And then again, back to Alan's point, that's playing into Dundee United hands. That's not, that's not something that we're particularly good at. So yeah, long-winded as usual. That we've picked our poison going down this path, and just a natural aspect of that outcome of that is that we're going to have games like this. The question is how many more of them of the last 7 are going to break in this kind of reactive, lack of controlled way against teams that can make us pay for it. I wish I had a good sense of that. I don't.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because even though it goes kind of against the premise of my question, I did see a lot of tactical analysis of the League Cup final between Man City and Arsenal at the weekend, and a lot of people were saying that that Pep Guardiola had cracked the fact that Arsenal don't actually know what to do if you stand off them. Like, they only know how to get past you if you press them and they can break the press. But if you stand off them and let them have the ball, they don't actually and actually prevent the passes into the midfield. They don't actually know what to do with it, other than kind of maybe shell up the park, which is not what they normally play like, and then it's easy to get possession back,
Are you saying that Arteta is like Derek McInnes? Is that what you've just done there?
Absolutely. On the basis of absolutely no evidence, I'm going to go with it. Just say they've got one very, very obvious thing in common, and so therefore everything they do is the same. But yeah, no, I just thought it was an interesting piece of analysis, and it kind of fitted in here. You opened the door about the Jim Goodwin thing, so I'm going to walk right through it. Alan, you've got some statistics, I think, that going back to 2019 about how we've fared against Jim Goodwin sides of the past. So put this weekend's performance into a little bit of wider context for us.
You walked through the door and then stood on that rake.
I am Sideshow Bob, yeah.
Went to Sideshow Bob territory straight away. So this is in the spirit of, I do like to, the only way I can amuse myself as terrible performance gets stacked upon terrible performance is to try and find some way to contextualize those terrible performances, which also helps me to justify why I've spent the last 11 years gathering all this data, because I can now contextualize it in reference to that. So this is our record against Jim Goodwin teams. So 2019 was when he was St Mirren manager. He then went on to Aberdeen and Dundee United as far as teams with whom Celtic have locked horns. 17 games, 12 wins, 2 draws, 3 losses. 2 of those 3 losses in the last 3 games. Marvellous. So this was the worst XG difference of any team, any Jim Goodwin team that we've ever played against. That's by my data. I was interested to see that FOTMob had adjusted it such that Celtic had a slight XG plus on the plus side, like tiny 0.02 or something, which I thought was interesting. StatsBomb had a sort of narrow XG difference in Dundee United's favour, and mine were 0.35 in Dundee United's favour. This is the worst, although it was a positive packing score difference, and this was a game, by the way, of just constant turnovers. So both teams, Celtic racked up the highest pack turnover score we've ever had against a Jim Goodwin team, and as a result, the worst packing score difference of plus 63 against any team managed by him. And actually, Celtic attempted the third lowest number of pressures against a Jim Goodwin team. As James says, as far as Dundee United pressing, it was quite effective. And in fact, they won the ball back from 31% of their pressures, which is not Jim Goodwin's style of play. In fact, the next highest any Jim Goodwin side has had as far as regains is 23%. That's a hell of a jump. And that was this season. So it's all good news, isn't it? So this was just epically bad as far as playing Jim Goodwin sides. And then another little thing just to amuse you even more, in case you're needing cheering up further. So this is a bit of an analysis of away games in the league, excluding derbies, where Celtic have had a negative expected goal difference, okay? And it's by season. So this season, which is in red at the bottom, in 7 matches, we've had a negative XG difference, which is more, right, or equal to the last 7 seasons put together, so, including 2021, by the way. Of all the games where we've had a negative XG difference going back to 2016-17, we've actually lost 3 until this season, in which we've lost another 3. And we're not even finished yet. We've got some pretty meaty away games to come. So this is, by my records, I would say the worst team and the worst set of performances that I've seen. And I think this is just another indicator of it. This kind of off the scale, being on the wrong end of the XG, never mind the goals. I mean, Celtic do still end up winning most of the games where they do have a negative XG. This season it's 7, 1-3 drawn, 1 lost 3, and actually a negative goal difference. So even that's not panning out this term at all. So it's just another indicator, really, of this is by far a worse team, I would say, than 2021. And you may have to go back to probably the Mowbray season, and as I say before that, probably 1994, just to see a worse Celtic team. That's kind of where we are. And the only good news I've got for you is, the other two teams challenging are not all that either. So that's our hope.
Yeah, that's the only positive to come out of it, is that I think the other two are no great shakes either, and none of the 3 of us are guaranteed any points against any opposition. It's a grim thing to have to hold on to, but we do what we can in this situation. Do you know, Alan, I really usually enjoy you bringing wider context to some of the statements that we make. I did not particularly enjoy that one, so we'll move on from it quickly.
Another fork in the face, yeah.
Well, exactly. James, you were saying before we came on here that you do have one positive, one factor to point towards in the goalkeeping area where we might still have hope. So what exactly is that? And I'll see if it really does cheer me up in any great manner.
Well, it's more so just to highlight how important, and again, this is so kind of self-evident and obvious conceptually, that if you're playing a crocked goalkeeper who's letting balls in or goals in at an unusually high rate, then you might as well just fold the tent and put an end to it. And whether it was by fortune and again, we talked about this last week, I certainly have personal empathy for Kasper Schmeichel dealing with what he's dealing with. But we may have lucked out that he had that adverse reaction to the pain blocker or whatever shot that it was that supposedly sent him down this pathway to getting surgery and basically knocking him out for the season. And I have, I thought this, for my column this week I'm doing for huddlebreakdown.com, I'm kind of revisiting this Schmeichel issue. And with all of the complete mess that was the 33 days under Wilfred Nancy, he was the singularity in those 33 days. If you go back just use the 7 league games that comprised that 8-game tenure, and if you whittle down to his 6, he was, I would argue, directly responsible, if I'm being charitable, 10 of them, and not because of these are plays that I think he should have made, and these are plays that he should have made, I think, because of both him being out of shape, i.e. carrying too much weight as a professional footballer, and having a kind of notable left arm injury and shoulder injury. So if you go back and look at each one of these goals, which I did in the video that'll be in the piece that'll be published, should be by the time this goes out, that's just an incredible amount. I mean, you're talking 10 out of 15 goals. So that's even beyond the fact that we had strikers that had the ball sitting 6 yards out and couldn't score, right? And the juxtaposition of that Dundee United game under Nancy with this one, I think, kind of brings this to light. Is that ultimately it's about the players, and if you have a keeper that can't save any shots or isn't because he needs a shot. At that time, a painkiller that he ended up taking, I think, right after the Dundee United game or the Aberdeen game. I forget which one, but and only missed one game, but came back. And I would argue was bad on all 3 Rangers goals in the Derby game that culminated in Nancy being sacked.
I mean, if you listen to Casper, his explanation for it swings between this supposed allergic reaction to an injection and also a particular dive against Stuttgart, I think, where he said he smashed his shoulder again. So the story is murky at best, I would say.
Yeah, and so again, the evidence, but it was above and beyond even just the left arm stuff. It was being heavy and old, which I can relate to, muting your quickness, and so I have and this was in the Motherwell game. So again, that was the one game in the Nancy tenure where I said, throw your hands up. There's no defending this. Like, we were absolutely awful in that game. Not too dissimilar to this Dundee United game under O'Neill. You're just like, there's really no defending. There was maybe small pieces in here. But above and beyond that, we could have got away with a draw in that game. Right. So it's back to Alan's point. Like, when we play horrible and we lose the XG battle, a lot of times we get a result anyway, because of the randomness of football. And usually we don't get crushed when we lose the XG battle domestically. It's usually, kind of nip and tuck, as we say, within that one non-penalty XG difference. The other side might beat us by 0.5 or 0.4 or something like that. So I thought the first goal against Motherwell was the postcard of not only that 8-game Nancy period and Schmeichel's role in it, but really the season under with Schmeichel, where again he's done some good things. We talked about this last week. The continuum wasn't like Alan McGregor's last season at Rangers, where he was god awful the whole season. Like, he's had some flashes of a month or 6 weeks under O'Neill the first time, and even in January this year when he came back from his shot injection around the new year, where he played decently. But this screenshot that I'm sharing is the first goal against Motherwell.
Yeah, James. Sorry to interrupt. Hey kids, you count them. How many players have Celtic got along the back line? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 at the back. When does Celtic ever play 5 at the back? Yeah. God damn you, Nancy, you defensive clown.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. If you go back through all of the goals, which our subscribers will be able to, a couple of them were like the third goal against St. Mirren in the cup game when we were down 2-1 and trying to push in a cup game, in a cup final. We got caught on a counter. So there's maybe only 2 out of those 15 that were what you would call, chaotic breakaway type of goals. More of them were like this. And again, this goes back to the culpability of Schmeichel. So this is right before the point of the cross in the first goal against Motherwell, where he's standing on the 6-yard line. Okay. This is at the point of the header by Said. And look where Schmeichel's standing, and look where the ball is. All he had to do was stand still and if you go back and watch the video of this, the ball was a long looping high cross. Okay. So this goes back to his judgment coming for crosses, and it's not just shot stopping. Like, it's just 3-dimensional keeper play. The Trimidi goal, the first goal in the Derby game when we lost 3-1, again, he was like a ball's hair from, getting to the cross that Trimidi taps in. Well, maybe if he's 10 pounds lighter and a couple of years younger, he's quick enough to get to it. And there's a lot of that in this, the 7 games that he played under Nancy, where he was just a little not quick enough, or his left arm, like the goal against Aberdeen, which again, it was a comfortable win because of the red card, but it was just a really bad piece of keeper play. So long-winded way of going about to saying he's gone now and having a 7-game stretch, the risks of us trying to keep him playing to get ready for the World Cup for Denmark, when he was, maybe going to get a little bit better with another injection, but not to the point where he couldn't have another stretch of games like this, where he was diabolically bad and you could just flush the, title contention down the toilet. I think Sinisalo gives us a fighting chance because he's young, because he's athletic. We see that at least so far, his judgment coming from crosses has been pretty good. His shot stopping seems to be pretty tidy. So I think the risks of him, crapping the bed over a 7-game period and costing us games like Schmeichel did, and costing us points like Schmeichel did during that period in December, is a lot lower than had we persisted with Schmeichel. And I think the scary part about all of this is that it seems like Woods was willing to resign over sticking with Schmeichel back in December. That's my supposition given the fact pattern and the public reporting at the time. And it seems like had he not had that allergic reaction to that shot in February, he'd probably still be in goal right now, come hell or high water. So we maybe caught a break that happened, and I think that dramatically reduces our risk, at least at the vitally important keeper position. Given the nature of what's going on with us giving up chances, I think we have a better shot with Sinisalo than we would have otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to understand why they have stuck with Schmeichel for as long as they have, because if it's obvious to us, then I'm sure it's obvious to people within the club that he was not performing to his best. But I think any attempt by us to come to a conclusion on why they stuck with him would obviously be speculation. So who knows? Speculation that I have also thought about is looking at that Motherwell chance, or that Motherwell goal that I remember as clear as day. I actually wonder whether his lack of coming for crosses and catching crosses is because he literally doesn't have the ability to put one of his arms above his head. Which again, I have no basis in fact to state that, apart from the fact that the descriptions I've read of the injury would suggest, if I had a shoulder like that, I wouldn't want to be raising it any higher than about here. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's an issue. But before we move on to another thing, I've just had a piece of breaking news come through. So boop, 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 ticker. And we're recording this on Tuesday night. Mo Salah is set to leave Liverpool after however many years, which I find hilarious because the guy spent last season chucking his toys out the pram wanting a new contract and then chucking his toys out the pram because he got dropped. But my question to you, Alan, is would a 33-year-old Mohamed Salah be an upgrade on Yang?
No, not for Martin O'Neill. Absolutely not. That's an interesting one. Liverpool's season actually has been a fascinating one, and one to be studied really in terms of how poor their title defence has been, the money they spent, the genuine talent that they bought. But then it's so delicate because you've got a Virgil van Dijk who's kind of strolled his way through the Premier League for all these years, suddenly having to defend corners and set pieces and long balls into the box all the time and doesn't seem to like it. You got at least 3 stalwarts there in Robertson, Salah, and Van Dijk that you might have argued, well, did you need to start managing them out a little bit? Maybe not all 3 of them at the same time, but it's a lesson. We've seen this with Celtic. Not managing players out who are perhaps not going to be as valuable to you as they once were, or want to leave. And then the delicacy of the midfield balance of that team by introducing a player like Florian Wirtz, who's a classic 10, hard-working, one of the most highest pressing forwards in German football. And they worked out he had to put on about 10 pounds of muscle. 10 kilograms, not 10 pounds, 10 kilograms of muscle. Because he's physical battler side of the English Premier League. And by the way, you can't play Wirtz and Salah in the same team because you just leave big holes in midfield. And it's these little things. This is why, again, we come back to something like Jamestown Analytics. It's not about going out and buying the best players. It's about buying the players that will best fit with the other players that you've got and the style of play you want to implement to make the best sort of system. Now, to be fair, Liverpool, we've always thought had leading edge, really. in terms of that kind of detail and complexity of analysis and modelling that goes on. But even then, they can still make mistakes. So that's a fascinating story. I'm not surprised he's leaving. I think there could be a few famous names leaving English football end of the season. Who knows what Pep Guardiola's thinking, for example. So, and I'm just really happy that you brought that up so we don't have to talk about Celtic anymore.
You've now got me dreaming that we're going to get Pep Guardiola and Mo Salah next season, and now I'm just like, oh.
Inevitable, yeah. That's exactly the project they're both looking for, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but it speaks to how delicate some of these issues are, and it's not only the players, but it's the system and the role within the system. And I think one of the things I've heard this week, people talking about, understandably, was the Rio Hatate shift to right back, and how just I'm characterizing how people have referenced it as how wildly stupid that was.
Do you know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of Callum McGregor at left back against, was it Ross County under Neil Lennon or something like that? He did that and we crashed out of the cup or something like that. Well, I might be getting my facts wrong, but it's something like that. Yeah,
so the other one was McGregor to left back against Cluj. And I think those are understandable reference points that people will go to. But it comes back to what's the style of the game, what's the nature of the game, what's the system being played, and what's the player's role in it. So if we're home against St. Johnston last season and Rio Hatate goes to right back playing in that system under Brendan Rodgers, where we got 80% possession, St. Johnston almost is never even getting in our defensive third, that's a total different kettle of fish than what that was on Sunday, which was devolving into chaos ball in the second half. And, Dundee United really coming into the game, and him going up against Ferry, who is Alan referenced, has been one of the best players in the league this season. One of the best attacking players, playing on a team that doesn't attack that much too. So he really has stood out. So that's different. It's just like, McGregor actually wasn't that bad at left back when he's played there historically, because he's different and maybe makes a mistake, because it was different in doing it. Then it gets, hung around the manager's neck, the albatross. But, can you imagine Cal McGregor at 26 playing the Greg Taylor role in an inverted left back as under Ange Postecoglou? So I'm just making that point, trying to make the point that it really is dependent upon system and role and the dynamics of the game of who the opposition is and that type of thing. So I wouldn't have wanted to see Rio Hatate at right back in that circumstance. But I'm not like Pavlovian against Rio Hatate at right back. I actually think there's situations where he suits that just fine under the right manager and the right system. So, I think it devolves into these binary topics, framing quite often, but I think it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah, well, if you buy into the football and philosophy of one of my favourite footballing figures, Johan Cruyff, if you go to the extreme of that, his suggestion was that every outfield player should in some way be able to play every position on the pitch. I'm not sure how much I agree with that. But it's a theory that has been posited.
I suspect that the world is reverting back to Cruyff. That's how the man-to-man marking. That's one of the solutions with all this relationalism or whatever that some teams are moving towards to try and break out of this man marking regime and the physicality that the EPL's devolved into, as Alan referenced, is to have the interchangeable players, to have your fullbacks look like center backs, look like your midfielders, look like your wingers, and everyone's kind of similar size and speed and technical ability, and everyone run around like a bee's hive to make it hard to man mark. So anyway,
the physical profile of players is becoming homogenous in the sense that it doesn't matter where you're going to put someone at right fullback, wing back, centre midfield, striker. They've got to have a certain base level of physicality, strength, speed, etc. And therefore, whereas previously, less so in football, players will start to look similar physically. They may have they will have, I'm sure, different cognitive and technical skill sets. But even then, that may start to homogenize a bit more because of that thinking. I mean, the Cruyffian football, which is really actually Rinus Michels is the father of most of Cruyff's thinking on football. Was actually the manifestation of it, taken to its nth degree, was the sort of Guardiola-esque total control, every player interchangeable, but very, very positional, very, very controlling, actually, which is what everyone got bored with. And here we are back to Wimbledon circa 1988. So it all evolves non-linear in a non-linear way, but it all builds on what went before.
The best example of it I can think is in Guardiola's teams of recent years, having people like Nathan Ake and Joseph Gvardiol playing at fullback when, to the eye anyway, they look like standard centre-backs, and then everybody started doing it, and that's how you had Dan Burn at left-back at Newcastle and Ben White at Arsenal, and it just kind of, everybody copying everybody else.
So Guardiola's big thing became, his obsession became winning the Champions League, obviously, which he's done, three times, which is more than respectable. But and the number of times his team would get caught out on the counter attack, so he started to put centre backs in centre midfield. But players like John Stones, who are incredibly talented on the ball, it was that kind of player. Nathan Ake, good footballer, Dutch, obviously. So yeah, and he's the kind of seer on a lot of these things. He was the first guy to do this, really, and others follow. Arteta being, I think Arteta's taking things even further. And actually, Man City now are playing quite old-fashioned football. They've got the non-footballing.
And getting a bit of a hard time for it. They are the 2026 Stoke, basically.
The big lad up front, and then all these mavericks who just get to do what they want. It's brilliant. He has just gone to hell with it. To hell with all this process and systems. Let's just have a laugh. Proper 70s football, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's watched the All or Nothing series on Amazon of Arsenal, I implore you to watch it, because some of the team talks in that are a sight to behold. Something to do with a light bulb and something else. It was crazy, but anyway.
The Basque McInnes.
Yes, indeed. But see, this is what I mean, folks. We go slightly off Celtic, and you think we're geeky about Celtic, but we could really get geeky about all sorts of stuff, and maybe we will over the summer or something like that when there's a little bit less to talk about. But to bring it back to Celtic, James, you sort of made the point as well, and Alan sort of talked about it. Liverpool obviously being a good example of spending the money isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. It's about finding the right players. I think the problem with Celtic is that we're not willing to spend the money, and we don't appear to have a system to identify the players. So is it a case of, do we need to look for the replacement for Paul Tisdale? Are we in a situation where it needs to be somebody with a sensible head on their shoulders who comes in and sort of completely revamps the scouting system and the recruitment system, so that we have an idea in mind of the type of players that we want?
I don't think any of that matters as long as Dermot Desmond is the puppet master. So I think what the Brendan Rodgers tenure 2 devolved into was not dissimilar to tenure 1 in the sense of a conflict between Rodgers versus how the club were acquiring players, and his thinking about the type of player that he wanted playing in his system, pace and power, however you want to call it, and the price range that he was trying to push and push the boundaries of comfort level that nominally Dermot Desmond has on whether that's wage structure, but also transfer fees. And it seems like Rodgers got his one window to try it, and it didn't go all that well, in fairness, with Ida and Trusty and Engels, So And we did ramp up the wage bill. This is the thing. You know, people say we haven't spent money. The wage bill getting up, total wage bill, this isn't just first team, but the total wage bill getting up at 76 million or 77 million for fiscal 2025. And again, even in January, I know everyone says we didn't spend any money, but the players that we brought in that coming from Germany, from France, they will have not, and Oxlade-Chamberlain, these guys were not on $5,000 a week. So from a wage bill perspective that was already largely probably maxed out, piling on more wages, even if it's for a few months. I'm not saying it's what I would have wanted or that it was optimal, but I don't think you can say that the club's been completely cheap in the sense of the amount of resources within the operating model, the framework that we know they have. So again, if you're Brendan Rodgers, piss and moan about the model, but don't come in and all of a sudden expect them to change, especially after you have your shot in one window and it doesn't go well. And then understandably, whether it was a snake salesman, grifter, fraud that sold Dermot Desmond that he could do it, but the Tisdale with Nancy model was basically saying, okay, we're going to take the limitations of what this guy's given us and we're going to operate within it. And that's what they were going to do. And it lasted 33 days and here we are. So I don't know if we're going to bring in another big high-profile name manager who's going to come in and think that all of a sudden Dermot Desmond's going to sign off on 15 million pound players and we're going to go pay guys $50,000 a week all of a sudden. I just don't see that happening. And I don't see Dermot Desmond all of a sudden embracing modern analytics and hiring a director of football and backing himself out of the transfer market dealings and player trading model. So, rinse and repeat. We're going to end up with another version of Paul Tisdale and Wilfred Nancy, which could be Askew, by the way. Give Askew's not that dissimilar to Nancy profile-wise, with some guy who's going to say, okay, Dermot Desmond, we'll sign a bunch of 2 and 3 and 4 million pound players. I that could be, or it's going to be bring some bigger name in. It's going to get upset after a season or two and want to leave because Desmond says one thing and then it never comes to fruition. So I know I'm not optimistic on either outcome as long as Desmond's the puppet master.
Talking of outcomes, let's look ahead. Alan, you've got an update to the expected XG table that we looked at last week. Expected points table, that we looked at last week. So for full context, currently we are sitting in third place with 61 points, Rangers on 63 and Hearts on 66. The entire table have played 31 matches and obviously there's 2 more league matches to go before the split. So we have Dundee away on the 5th of April and then St Mirren at home on the 11th of April. That's where we are currently. With that in mind and bearing we've still got the other matches to go after the split, how is it looking at the moment, Alan?
This is the projection, if you like. So this is the expected league table. It takes the points already banked by teams and then factors in an estimate of future performance based on performances throughout the season. There's nothing particularly clever about it. It's not sort of adjusted for split, post-split or anything like that, really. It's just averages. So, but then it's the same for all teams, to be fair. And actually, Celtic were top of this last week, and now they're third. So it just really goes to highlight how one game can change things around quite dramatically. This is a largely kind of expected goals-driven model, leads to an estimate.
Can I just ask about that, Alan? Is that affected by the fact that it was Dundee United that beat us? Would the expected points have changed if we'd been beaten by a team lower down in the table or a team higher up in the table, or is that independent of that?
Yeah, no, it's not got the complexity of factoring in, for example, and something like an ELO rating or a Opta ranking or something like that. It doesn't do that. That's a slightly different methodology. So listen, these things are estimates. They're not going to be precise, but they might be there or thereabouts. But in any case, even though Hearts look like, and as I say, this is now, I think, quite consistent with quite a lot of what I've read elsewhere, that it looks likely that the league winning total will be less than 80 points. So what did you say? Celtic are on 61 at the moment. So
61 at the moment, yeah.
If they were to win 6 of the last 7 games, get to 79 points, that could be enough to win the league. But it does suggest very little margin for error. Maybe 6 wins and 1 loss would actually still be okay. Is there 7 games left, or is there 8?
7 games left.
Seven
league games.
So I think we're based on this. We're at the point where 6 wins out of 7, even if they lost the other game, just about squeak the league. Be finishing around about on 79 points. Celtic's performance this week was probably no worse, no better than Hearts' performance at Kilmarnock the week before, frankly. And who's to say that won't be repeated again? The Rangers have had 2 bits of pretty good fortune, really, because they've played in consecutive weeks St Mirren and Aberdeen, who both, obviously one manager went from one to the other, and therefore both teams have had new managers, and that had an impact on how they played. Aberdeen were absolutely appalling, actually. Ibrox. I mean, in terms of on the ball, they were shocking, really. One of the worst performances I've seen from any team in any game this season. And St Mirren, the week before, playing at home to the Rangers, had pivoted from a long ball game, which Stephen Robinson had played for years, to a play out from the back game, and the players just looked lost, didn't know what to do. So they've had a bit of good fortune in coming up against 2 teams like that in the last 2 weeks, and then they've got Dundee United at home, who, not playing on their home pitch, I suspect will be a very different proposition. But then after that, their fixtures get a bit hairy. But then so does Celtic. So even having said that, Hearts look like they're going to be a couple of points maybe above the Rangers based on expected points. But again, this is all too close to call. Last week it was a similar profile, different order, and one result kind of switched things around quite dramatically. It could happen again next week or the weekend after that. So I wouldn't give up hope. It's just that it is very difficult to see how you can play like that at Tannadice in a game that you will probably think you should be winning. How you can't rouse the team to a better performance than that. And you think about the teams that we're playing. They're all going to be good teams. They're all going to be very difficult fixtures. But it's the same. It's the same for all these sides. As I said before, Hearts are wedded to this chaotic style of play. They won eventually at home to Dundee off a set piece, 50-yard straight ball into the box, and a bit of muscle meant that somebody got their head on the end of it. They would never look like they were going to lose the game, but that if a game had 0-0 written all over it for long periods, it was that one. And we know with the Rangers, they do struggle to create in open play, especially. And I think with both Hearts and the Rangers, as the season's gone on, teams are getting a bit more wise to their set-piece patterns, and they're not quite as productive in that regard as they had been earlier in the season. And that's for Celtic, as I say, that's the big unknown. It could suddenly click, although I've got no evidence for saying that. They could at least be competent, maybe, for a few games. But again, listen, this is all conjecture, rumour, as we talked about earlier. We don't know why Araujo didn't play. Illness, apparently. Or there was no reason given for Araujo. It's Vancaro, apparently it was illness. We don't know if there's other things going on there. But that, again, this all has echoes potentially of COVID season, self-harm, players being unavailable for reasons out with simple football reasons. Maybe, again, conjecture, rumour, I don't know. I don't have any information on that. Just all a bit odd. And we can do without missing anybody at this stage of the season, because it doesn't look like many of the long-term crops are going to be back. Even getting Engels back at this stage would be... It was funny when James was talking about the Brendan Rodgers window and he was given all that money to spend, and he was going like, Trusty, Engels, like Ida. I thought, oh God, we could do with them. Wouldn't the team be better if those 3 were playing? And who would have said that a year ago, right? And that's kind of where we are. So listen, don't give up hope. It can change again very quickly. None of these teams are convincing. Their performances very very variable between home and away, and simply by Celtic having 3 games at home in the last set of fixtures could be a factor. So it's as much as I've got for you. Just don't give up hope.
Yeah, just to put a bit of context on one of the comments you made there, because I know what the internet's like and they'll clip things out of context. Your use of the phrase self-harm was in relation to the club sort of self-imposed implosion.
Body creating issues that otherwise didn't exist.
Just because it came across when you said that the implication being that certain players were maybe committing self-harm, which was not what you said. So, James, just an interesting thought exercise before we finish up, to use Alan's expected table. If if the top 3 teams were to meet the expected points totals that is in that table, it would mean we would have to win 4 and draw 1 out of our remaining 7, and I think both Rangers and Hearts would have to win 4 out of the remaining 7. I guess what highlights the kind of unpredictability of the remainder of this season is I can't see any of the 3 of us performing to that level of consistency, especially considering the majority of those 7 matches that we're all playing will be against other teams in the top 6. So I guess my question for you is, even with only 7 games to go, do you expect there to be a lot of shifting back and forth between now and the end of the season?
Yeah, I think the pivot in this is Hearts, and if Hearts are able to win, particularly their last couple of games pre-split, which shouldn't be that, I shouldn't say that difficult, but when you look at who they're playing, it's like, okay, well, they probably have the glide path. Rangers going to Falkirk is, definitely a potential banana skin. Any team going to Falkirk, it's been difficult this season. So, and so I think that'll be a pivot game for them potentially. But I think Hearts, because of the return of Shanklin, and again, I've been railing against McInnes, railing against Shanklin for the last couple of seasons, even on Shanklin. But the one thing you can't take away from Shanklin is that he can be an elite finisher, particularly in small bunches. So it is not beyond a reasonable scenario that he could get hot shooting for 7 games, and even in 5 of them, to the point where he's the reason that they, win 3 points in 3 different games, that kind of thing. And I think if you look at the teams in each box, that's why I referenced this thing with Sinisalo and Schmeichel earlier. If we still had Schmeichel, I'd be like, oh, because our ability to finish in the attacking box has been woof. and if you threw in a keeper that's uncertain, I would really not like our chances at all. The fact that we've got Sinisalo.
Are you saying, just to break that down, James, are you saying that being unable to score goals and conceding lots of goals is bad?
Right. I mean, it's just analytics FC over here. So yes, very complicated concepts. And Rangers, Butland has been good this season. He's not beyond having a rough patch. He's shown that in the past. Schwalwell's been a good keeper too. And I think the thing that Hearts have is Braga and Shanklin. These are 2 guys that have shown an ability to really finish. And the guys at Rangers, particularly the strikers, haven't really shown that. Olsen's been kind of off it since he's been over, and Moore's been very inconsistent. So that's the part, I think, in the opposite, in both boxes, Hearts potentially have an edge there. It's in between the 18s and their manager and the style of play that they have that I think undermines that advantage to a material degree and creates all this potential uncertainty. But the other big thing from a Rangers perspective is I think out of the 3 teams, they are the ones that could have a level set higher based off of their January window. And they're still nascent in this new style of play. And they've, had 3 weeks now to train it. We're not playing twice a week. So I think that's another potential. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it's a potential advantage that they could have, that there have been indications of improvement there, as there has been all season under Roll. Because again, I think Roll's a pretty decent coach, whereas I haven't seen that kind of improvement. It seems like we get worse the more time we have to train without whatever it is we're trying to do to deploy a style of play. It doesn't seem to be taking much traction. So we kind of know what Hearts are going to do. It's not very good style of play. Good in both boxes. Rangers might be on the ascent with their style of play, but they have to prove it in the box, in the attacking box. And if they do, if they're able to ramp things up a little bit here, then Hearts are going to have to be really good in both boxes in order to hold them off, I think.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the table as you're talking there, and any way you look at it, it's really, really erratic. So, for example, Rangers have won 17, drawn 12 and lost 2. Hearts have the kind of record you would expect of a team at the top. They've won 20, drawn 6 and lost 5, whereas we've won 19, drawn 4 and lost 8. So, there's no pattern in terms of where the points are coming from there from the teams, and I think lends itself to the kind of unpredictability of things. And just to close out on this conversation, Alan, just because I didn't notice James bring it up, but you have the suspicion that as well as Falkirk being a difficult place to go, Motherwell, although they are on 54 points and are probably out of reach for overtaking us, I say with crossed fingers, they could certainly have a massive impact on where the title goes, bearing in mind, none of the 3 teams above them is guaranteed to beat them.
Yeah, I think with Motherwell, saw signs of it against Celtic and more evidence of it home to Hibernian, just look like they're running out of steam. And listen, that's no disgrace. It's a small squad playing a very physically demanding style of play, and they've achieved great things this season. This happens, especially a team overachieving. I might be wrong. This after a 2-week break, who knows? They could get galvanised from a fitness and freshness perspective, but they just look like they're running out of steam a little bit. And there is probably a little bit of teams starting to work out how to nullify them a bit. I didn't see the game against Hibs, but from what I read, it looked like Hibs did a pretty good job of kind of closing them down and stopping the way that they played. And in the post-split fixtures, you can guarantee the likes of Falkirk, Danny Rule, even especially Derek McInnes, will be setting out to stifle them and to close them down and stop them doing what they're doing. And I'm not trying to put a dampener on their achievements this season or how they've played, but that's just, I can only use the evidence of the last 3 games that, as I say, that they might just be going through a bit of a slowdown. And it'll be interesting to see how Askew kind of revitalizes them, and if they are getting not found out, that's too black and white a term, but how do they kind of re-engage to get the team adding a bit more unpredictability to the game, maybe.
Indeed. Predictability is something that is sorely lacking in this league this season, unfortunately, and it's not good for my health, but we will we'll see how it goes. We've got a 2-week break. We've got some international football to enjoy, if that's the word that's most appropriate to use for it. But that'll shoot up. Who's heading over to your shores, James? And
if they can get in.
Well,
we'll see.
I mean, we are anything but a political podcast, so I will set that one down on the table and leave it there. Alan, tell us where people can find us, where they can follow us, and what they can expect if they do so.
Yeah, huddlebreakdown.com. Please join us. The chat's great. The community's really great. The best aspect of it, in my view. The articles will flow over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we've got no games. I like that in the respect of it gives more time for doing a bit of writing. You'll get all. I
like that the way we're playing right now as well.
Yeah, in my mind, it's already better than it was on Sunday. All the Speedboat League tables and all that will be out at some point this week as well. Got a guest article coming out also. We might, and again, I've sprung this on James a little bit, but maybe if not this Thursday, probably next Thursday, we'll do like a Q&A. Might even do a live show for extra time and get listeners' questions. I think that's probably a good use of time for the international break.
Indeed, as I always say, you have to pay for Martin, but you get me for free. Aren't you lucky? But anyway, thanks very much, James and Alan, for joining me. Thanks everybody for watching and or listening. There may be an international break, but the Huddle Breakdown does not take one, so we will see you all again next week.